panelists. So when you're ready, panelists, we have some questions and all that, but you go ahead and do your presentation. We'll make sure that we have that happening for you. So at this time, panelists.
I am a fill-in, so I had to do a couple modifications to a talk I'm going to do tomorrow, so please bear with me. Of course, what we're talking about now is empowering characteristics that lead to authentic research success in an international setting. And I really want to talk. All right, is that better? Okay, great, great. So I really want to put on my project director for the Illinois LSAMP program there in Illinois. The program is composed of about 15 institutions, 9 four-year institutions, 1 government lab, Argonne National Laboratory, and then the balance are actually two-year institutions. Our focus over the last couple of years since the LSM program has really put forth international endeavors have really been fourfold. And one of them are establish international opportunities that will enable students to understand and participate successfully in global science endeavors. Now, with that being said, over the last 5 years, we've had the fortune and opportunity using various mechanisms to send students and faculty to several places in the world. And just to mention a few, they've been Argentina, Barbados, Brazil, India, Ireland, Jamaica, Kenya, the Philippines, South Africa, and Switzerland. So we've been very excited about our students being able to have those opportunities and actually to have those exposures. So off the cuff, there's really 4 things that I think of when we're talking about empowering characteristics. The first thing, which is probably primary, is that the mentors have to affirm and reinforce students' identities and self-concept as research scientists. It really starts in the lab. And for myself, when I was working in the lab with students, I really saw my students as my children. So you really want the very best for them. You're going to try to instill in them the confidence that they need so that they can be successful. And even when I went with my students to conferences and they would be asked the tough questions, I'll just be kind of hovering in the background, and every now and then I'll give them a thumbs up, hey, you're doing a great job, but they have to figure it out themselves. So it's the same thing, with the mentors. We have to make sure that we provide that stability, that confidence, for our students so that once they go overseas, they can really just be at the top of their game. The second thing, empowering characteristics, which just always amazes me with these programs. So we have money from the National Science Foundation, we have money from the Department of Education, we have money, coming from the university as part of the institutionalization to send these students, off to this great trip. In my first couple of years doing this, we would send out all these advertisements, and the deadline would come for 4 positions, and I would be lucky if I had 1 person apply, for the position. And it took me some time to try to figure those things out. And one of the things that we quickly learned in terms of just trying to empower the students, empower characteristics, you actually have to figure out ways to develop recruitment strategies and relationships, with these students. So you just can't put it out there. You have to send your student coordinator, into the labs to talk to the students. During your conferences, you have to have those students get up and talk about their research experiences while they were abroad to kind of demystify, the whole concept of traveling, international. So that's a second thing with developing the characteristics. A third thing, which I just talked about, was also dispelling misconceptions about international travel. And what I mean by that is, if you look at news in the U.S., anytime it talks about abroad, international, it's always negative. It wasn't until I went overseas and started watching news over there that I realized that it's truly international. They talk about all aspects, of the world. So one of the things that we do, as the students are leading up to it, and as the students get into our LSM programs and into our Center for STEM Education and Research program, we encourage them, watch world news, BBC, watch some of the others, World One, look at some of the international blogs. That way they become a little bit more sensitive to what's going on, and at the same time build that confidence that it's a lot of great things going on overseas. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was just preventing students from self-selecting out. You know, so students just don't think, you know, for whatever reason, and there's a number of reasons, they don't think, you know, that they're qualified, you know, to participate, you know, in these trips. It could be GPA, you know, a lot of them could think we have to pay out of pocket. You know, students thinking we're going there by ourselves. And the previous panel kind of talked about, you know, sending students as cohorts. It could be passports. And what surprised me, I mean, these are even with students that have 3.5, you know, GPAs, you know, or greater. So, you know, that's just a couple of things when I think about that particular topic. Now, some significant highlights for our program there in Chicago. We've developed several international research opportunities over the years, as I talked about a little bit earlier. And we've been able to send about 43 students and about 2 dozen faculty to different places, you know, the CERN, you know, being one, and a couple other places where they do a mixture of things. It can be attending a conference. It can be working at the CERN, you know, for an extended period of time. We send students to the University of Johannesburg to do chemical research. We sent them also to Barbados, you know, to do coastal zone management unit type things, as well as a lot of other things. And then the last thing I want to mention is just about leveraging relationships and partnerships to support international research objectives. So one of the things that we did early on was we partnered with the Fulbright Academy of Science and Technology, you know, to help us identify places to go, provide mentors, bring people to Chicago State and to our institutions to talk with our students about these different opportunities that they have overseas. And with that, we've been able to leverage not only NSF dollars, but bring in Department of Education dollars, as well as the university itself kicking in money to send our students, you know, abroad. All right, so thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Jason F. Kirksey. I'm the VP for Diversity and the Chief Diversity Officer here at Oklahoma State. I also serve as the director of the LSAMP program. We've had it, there's some overheads or handouts. I'm not a PowerPoint guy, but there's some handouts of what I'm going to talk about here in a second with respect to LSAMP. So the Oklahoma Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation Program we've had now for 22 years here in the state. OSU is the lead institution. We have been, we've had a map there that just gives you a look at the institutions across the state that are represented as part of the alliance. One of the unique aspects about LSAMP is the number of Native American students that we serve. I believe 30%, about a third of all LSAMP graduates who are Native American come out of LSAMP, and so that's a significant portion of our population. I think about 45% of the scholars are of Native American descent. And then you've got to look at the 11 partners. We also have collaborations with community colleges around the state, including Oklahoma has 4 tribal colleges. And so we've developed partnerships and relationships with those tribal colleges around the state as well. And then you've just got a structure of what our structure looks like. Me as the PI, and then the state regents report up to, and then you've got a description. I won't read you the description, but our AMP Alliance runs just like most other AMP alliances. There's a strong emphasis on faculty mentored research. I'll talk a little bit about partnerships here and what the impact of that is. We have an annual research symposium that's statewide. Research symposium. We've got about 250 scholars across the alliance, and so most, if not all of them, come in for the annual conference. It's held in the fall as an opportunity to start presenting research, comfortable presenting research. There's a strong emphasis with our students to participate in conferences, both regional, national, and international conferences. And so a lot of what I really, the last page I included on there last page on there, because one of the things that's been a pretty consistent theme is money and having access to travel. And so in my particular role, I've been in this role for 7 years now. I'm a political scientist, so I'm not a STEM person, but I've been a poli-sci professor for 21 years here now. But in my role as VP and CDO, we've had the opportunity to support a number of students. Over the 7 years I've been here, we've probably sent 20 or 25 students on study abroad experiences. And so we have LSAMP situated here at OSU. It's part of the Division of Institutional Diversity. So our program manager, Kate Porter, that many of you met, and then Darlene Croce is the data coordinator for the Alliance that worked at the registration desk. And so Kay really should be up here because Kay does all the heavy lifting for the program, but in terms of just an administrative role, by the way, Kay is leaving, is retiring, so I just want to stick that out there real quick too. So if you,
I believe she said that she was going to stay another year.
so if you know of someone who has a passion for LSAMP, the LSAMP community is certainly a very, very special community. Those of you that attended the 25th Research Symposium in DC about a month or so ago, LSAMP is a really special community, and there's a lot of passion that goes into it for students. So if you're aware of someone that has that passion, please send them our way. We're in desperate need of replacing Kay, but the resource part of it is very important, and so the way that we have LSAMP situated here at the university gives us the opportunity to be able to support students in ways that they otherwise may not be able to receive support. The cost of the plane ticket, someone was mentioning earlier about the cost of going to Europe, and if we can supplement the cost of that plane ticket, for example. So there's a variety of things that we're able to do because of how we have LSAMP situated here at the university, and the fact that I have a pretty wide amount of discretion and lots of significant private dollars that enable us to provide those opportunities, those international opportunities for students is very significant. As a senior alliance, so we're older than 10 years, there's a specific emphasis that we're required to have by NSF on international experiences. In the last phase, for example, the last 5 years, we've had students go on international experiences to over 37 different countries around the world, from Antarctica to, and in my zeal, so I'll blame me for it, but there was a page that had the list of where they went, but I made the copies and my assistant didn't make the copies, and what happens when administrators do stuff they're not supposed to. But if any of you want this or any of the other information, I'm happy to provide it for you. But we have really focused on those international experiences. One of the things that we wrote into this last phase of the grant was to pay for passports. So we've heard passports come up quite a bit, and so we wrote that into our last LSAMP grant. And so students, one of the things that we ran into as we send out, Kay sends out lots of emails to students, and we've had students who have gotten international experiences just from opening those emails. But one of the things that we ran into a couple of years ago, we had an outstanding young lady, African-American female engineering student who had a great opportunity to go abroad, and we were all excited about it. She was excited about it, and we found out she didn't have a passport. And so what we decided to do in this phase of it was to write that in. And so now the scholars within the Alliance have the opportunity to have that passport. And as we wrote it, it's really providing a 10-year investment in students and their ability to go internationally. And so developing those relationships have been, or developing that component of it has been very important. The other thing that I think we've been successful in doing is utilizing students who have gone abroad, particularly as we talk about our significant Native American population of scholars around the state. We've got one example in particular I'll give you, a young lady who participated in NAPIRI. And so committed to do NAPIRI, and as it got closer, kind of got cold feet, and, what if, somebody in my family gets sick, or what if something happens, and so having some encouraging, we'll call them conversations with Kay, the student did participate in NAPIRI, came back and still raves about it today. That student is now a PhD student at the University of Oklahoma, and readily admits that she was very, very happy that she was strongly encouraged to take that international experience. And so she came back and has encouraged other students to participate that. And so since 2008, we've had, I believe, 10 of our Native American scholars around the Alliance participate in NAPIRI, for example. So the student peer piece becomes very important as we talk about those international experiences. And then finally, just the partnerships. The partnerships become very important, certainly internally. We've got, on our campus, we have about 90 scholars, and we have about 100 faculty who have agreed to serve as mentors, either now or in the past, to our LSAMP scholars. And that's become very important. We've got one faculty in particular who does a study abroad to Turkey, and the students that have participated in this program almost always get a publication. And the faculty lists the students as first or second author to make sure that the students are getting credit and getting put in positions to move into graduate school and be successful in learning the fundamental aspects to be successful as a researcher. The last piece is developing external partnerships. And so with Randy, wherever Randy went, Randy has been a fantastic partner for us. The last 2 years, as a result of the relationship with Randy, we've had 5 students as part of LSAMP, of LSAMP, that have gone to France. One went to Brazil, and that was a direct result of the relationship and the connections that have been developed with Randy and his programs. And then the other, just organizational support, again, with our large Native American enrollment, our numbers as scholars, SACNAS. So we've developed a tremendous partnership with SACNAS. For the previous 3 years, we had a program called LSAMP, which was focused on our Native American students. Faculty would come in, SACNAS representatives would come in a couple times a year ahead of the national conference, prepare those students. The students worked on their presentations and their research information to prepare them to go to the conference and be able to provide effective presentations. And so that program we've been able to somewhat sustain, not as much. We've sent 30 scholars for the last 3 years to the National SACNAS Conference. I think this year we only sent a handful, but we're still able to sustain a portion of it and make sure that those students get that exposure. And SACNAS, of course, is a tremendous conference, and the resources and networks that the students get exposed to has been incredibly valuable for them. So developing those internal as well as external partnerships becomes very important as we talk about giving students these research experiences, particularly in the international context. And then I only have a couple left, so I just brought one that should be floating around somewhere. The impact report we had to do that I think someone mentioned earlier, the California AMP, we had to do the impact report, but there's a section in the middle of it that talks about some of the international experiences and identify some of the students that had participated in those experiences as part of the OK LSAMP program. So that's OK LSAMP.
Thank you. I'll take the mic and may I sit behind the podium? Thank you. And I need to find my presentation. May I? I think it's not a bad idea if all of us stand up.
Everybody take a break. Rest a little bit. Stretch
All
it
right,
out.
I can't find my presentation.
We sold it when you were gone.
I found it. You found it?
We sold it. Made money.
No, it's not there.
Put it in his pocket. I told you, I sold it. All right, good deal.
All right. They're testing.
It's recording.
It's just for recording? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Or,
Hi.
yeah, you're all live. You gotta keep it close so they can pick you
Keep
up.
it going. My name is Benjamin Flores. I am the director of the UT system LSAMP, and I am privileged to be here. I want to thank Dr. Duran for extending a kind invitation to my team to come over to Oklahoma. We had to travel from El Paso, Texas to Houston, Texas, travel 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles. Okay, and then that just got us to Houston. So now then we had to make another trip to Oklahoma, so that's another few miles, but who's counting, right? Don't worry about that. I seek the safety of the podium because as a former administrator, I learned that I can hide from potatoes and tomatoes and cabbage that is thrown at you. But seriously, over the last decade, we have been engaged in an exercise in trying to provide international experiences to our students. In the first 5-year period between 2005 and 2010, our effort was really to take a community of learners, of faculty and students, to an international setting, whether that was somewhere in Asia or in Europe, to spend a week together, learn about science and engineering abroad through a conference or a similar event. And then we realized that we really needed to expand that experience to something that would be a little bit more substantial for the benefit of our students. So the idea then was to try to identify those characteristics that would allow our students to become successful in the research experience, and that happens to be goal one of these series of workshops that Dr. Duran is organizing. So our main focus is on what we call the Summer Research Academy abroad. And what we want to do is to select a group of students from the STEM disciplines. All of them are undergraduate students from the Alliance. We have 8 universities in the UT system, and in addition to that, we have 6 community colleges. And all of them participate in the selection of these students. Our undergraduate researchers must meet a particular set of characteristics. First of all, they must have had previous research experience. This is the way that we propose that we would develop the Summer Research Academy abroad to the National Science Foundation. So we insist on having students who have had that experience. We realize that that reduces the pool, but we make every single possible effort to emphasize the importance of doing research abroad to our students who have participated. And every year we have about 60 students who do undergraduate research in the UT system. So the following year, we have about 7 or 8 students. It's relatively simple, not too difficult to get students interested in applying for this type of experience. So overall, we really don't have much of a hard time trying to get students to participate. They all understand the importance of it. But of course, prior to that, we insist that they participate in a series of coaching sessions. This is absolutely important, and we ask our coordinator for the effort, Linda Gonzalez, who's here with us from UT Austin, to lead that effort. So she engages in a series of meetings. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. So the deadline for students to apply is in October, and we select by early November. And really from the time that the student accepts the offer, I start working with them. And we use Zoom a lot. We meet on the web or on the internet, over the internet. And we start immediately talking about their role in this whole process. Because the relationship I have with these students is that I'm going to coach them and I'm going to support them, but that I want them to sort of be in the driver's seat from the very beginning. And the reason is that I want them to, 8 months later, feel prepared, ready, confident to step on the plane and to go abroad. So what we do in November and December is we really work on finding their international placement abroad. And we utilize that colleague-to-colleague relationship you were talking about earlier. Their research mentor at their home university usually is the person that can connect us with somebody abroad, one of their colleagues abroad who's doing similar research that would be a good fit for the student. So the majority of our research placements are found in that way, and that we've just found that that's so successful because there's a lot of talk between the research mentors ahead of time, and also the student has kind of a home away from home already, even before they arrive there. So that extra connection really adds to their comfort level. So in the fall, we work on the research placement. I work with the students individually. And then starting in the spring, we meet in a seminar weekly. And again, it's a Zoom meeting. And finding a time where 8 undergraduate students from across Texas can meet 1 hour a week is very challenging, but once we get over that hurdle, we meet weekly all spring. And the seminar topics really cover about a third preparing for the research experience, about a third talking about travel and all the arrangements that go with that, health and safety, that sort of thing, and then a third on cross-cultural kind of expectations and what will happen. So like I said, by the time they step foot on the plane, they've already done some troubleshooting while they're here in the US, so I hope that experience kind of gives them the confidence. And then they're experts in their own location because our students are all going to different locations. So I want them to feel like they know what they're doing, and they, like I said, that they're the experts on their own trip.
Thank you, Linda. And I wanted to make sure that Linda brought several of these points because our model is a little bit different. I do believe in sending students in cohorts or learning communities, but I think this is another approach that actually works for our system because we have 14 sister institutions across the state, and in Texas it's not small. So we just have to work this way. I think it's better for us. Our students spend 8 to 10 weeks abroad. Right? Sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more. I think the record for least days spent abroad was 2 days or 3 days. That happened because a student was supposed to go down to Brazil. Bom dia, boa tarde. How are you? Doing well. I'm learning a little bit of Portuguese while I do this. And so there was an issue in regards to the type of visa that the student needed to have. And the university that was the host institution and the Brazilian government couldn't agree on the type of visa. So the student spent about 3 days at the airport and then had to head back. And then we had to think about another institution where the student could go, and happily the student was able to go to Italy, and he was very successful over there, but these things happen. And so it's very important to have conversations with the students about every single possible outcome out there while they're trying to get to their host institution. And then once they come back, they are committed to presenting their research out at our annual UT System LSAMP conference, and this is an opportunity for them, as I had mentioned in an earlier session, for the students to actually talk about their research and also talk about their experiences. So they get to give individual presentations to the entire conference attendees, and then we also have the students give presentations in a panel format so that the students can share their experiences abroad. So what is the profile of our students? And you may be surprised about this, but it actually, for many of them, is the first time that they're away from family. Okay, this may resonate with some of you, may be news to some of you as well. They may have never been on a plane. Okay, this is the first time that they're going to be traveling, and then they had to travel to another continent. So that's very exciting for them. Of course, they may not have a passport. They may have never thought about doing that, even though some of the institutions in the UT system are on the border. Some students never consider having a passport. So we have an early discussion about having that document available ASAP. And how much time do you give them?
Oh, that's part of our very first conversation.
Okay,
About
so
how to get a passport.
so it takes about a month or two, right?
Yeah,
Right.
we
to-
do that in the fall.
And they may not be prepared to live on a shoestring budget. We do give them a nice stipend, but we've decided that that wasn't enough the first time that we ran this experiment, so we gave him more money the second time around, and I think that solved the problem. Linda will tell me next year if she needs more money, but I think that we solved the problem. And the last thing is that they may be very apprehensive about language barriers. They may be comfortable working in a laboratory where English is the accepted language, but outside the walls of the lab, it's a very different story, right? So if they're going to have to learn Italian or learn a little bit of German or French, then that becomes an obstacle. Juvia, you went to Switzerland and you had to learn a little bit of,
French.
and how are you doing?
Oh, je sais un petit peu de français.
Ah.
I'm not that great. Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. Well, no, but now I have a trilingual student, so that's not bad, right? Not at all. I mean, what's the impact on the students? In a single word, they're changed, right? We all recognize that this type of experience is going to change them. They are very smart. They are great problem solvers, and they are very adaptable from the beginning. Those are characteristics, those are assets that we look for in our students. They have to be adaptable, they have to be problem solvers, and they have to be smart, of course. But when they come back, and they all do, thankfully, they come back with a big smile and a different perspective on life. And I think that's a great outcome. And that concludes my talk. Thank you.
My name is Frank Petzold. I'm Dean of Science and Engineering at Texas A&M, not College Station, but Corpus Christi. So we're actually islanders, but we affiliate with the other folks too. I was asked by our PI, Karen Butler-Purry, to come and speak. And I said, about what? And she said, well, it's about international research. And I said, oh, okay. And you have to meet Randy Duran, and so I met Randy in Washington at a meeting and got a little bit more information, found out that the Homa Nation was going to be represented, and that was exciting. My daughter-in-law is a member. And So here I am. But I'm actually, while I'm representing the LSAMP, I'm just going to briefly do that in terms of what we do, because we don't actually do it on our campus. Our LSAMP has opportunities for engineering students to go do research abroad at the Prairie View and the College Station campuses. We just got engineering. So we're bringing engineering to Corpus Christi, and we're thinking about abroad later. But in the meantime, we do have some activities that have occurred through our different faculty and such, and actually I'm one of them. And so I'm going to actually be talking about some of my experiences with a different kind of research abroad. We have study abroad programs on our campus, and we're actually developing a potential one for research abroad with a similar university in Scotland that's marine focused. We have a very marine focus. So what I'm speaking to is more like what you would have on campuses associated with REU programs. I had several of these, and I took two groups of students, both undergraduate and graduate and postdoc, to Africa twice. Excuse me, two groups to Africa, to West Africa, to Guinea. And then later, after I went to College Station, I did that when I was in Louisiana. And then when I went to College Station, I took 3 groups to Micronesia over 3 different summers. And some of the things that we've been talking about, all of the things we've been talking about are issues for these students. But we had added issues in terms of what we were going to be doing. So I'm an ichthyologist. I catch fish. This was not my crew. This was a fish festival on a lake off of the Niger River in Mali. No, just inside of Guinea. In Guinea. Basically every year, this one lake is opened up by the person that owns it to a village that's nearby. And I think the person who owns it is Fulani, and then it's a Malenka village, and they have very different traditions. And the Fulani folks basically use this as a pond, a stock pond, to take care of their herd animals. But we were there, we were just in time for this annual event, and it was very cool, and it was a great experience for our students. So, what I'm talking about is field collections that are associated with biodiversity studies. And there are a number of people who do this, and they go all over the world. In fact, I rode in with Fred Sanford from LSU, and he does it with ornithological research. Excuse me. Use the mic. Okay. So one of the issues that we encountered first off was getting students to go to Africa on these first ones. And the reason for that was because Americans are extremely ignorant of Africa. We see what's on TV. It was already mentioned that all we hear is the negative stuff in the news. And it's not until you can actually get them over there to experience the cultures that you can awaken appreciation for the diversity of cultures and the age of some of these cultures. So this was a really great experience for our undergraduates, a real eye-opener. I had no underrepresented students on those trips. A lot of the students at our university who were coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, they want to go to med school. They don't want to go collect fish in Africa. It's like, why do you want to do that? Where does that pay? You know, they may have relatives that have done fishing, and they just don't see the connection. But I did manage to entrain a couple of students, for each trip, undergraduates. I didn't have any problem with the graduate students because they were already savvy to some degree. But, you know, American understanding of what Africa really is like is, Well, the last thing we heard was Ebola, I think. Okay? And then before that, it was a civil war here or a civil war there. And just, the bad news. That's all it ever comes across. So anyway, I did get a team. And one of the things that I also did was I trained other faculty to go with me because of the nature of what we were trying to do. And there were two things that drove both getting faculty and students engaged. One was that it was really going to have an impact. For the faculty, for sure, it was going to have something to do that was going to get them tenured if they weren't tenured, or add to their, research progress. And then on the other part was capacity building. So what we were doing in our trips to Guinea was we were helping various groups there to establish a resource, a national resource. And it doesn't look like much, but the picture in the lower left side there is a fish collection. But these are specimens that have been identified by authorities in the field, and they're there to teach other people as a reference. It's like a library. They can go pick this up. Oh, this is from the Conqueré River. Oh yeah, this is the same thing I got. Of course, they have literature too, and there's a tremendous French research presence there through IRD. But there was another benefit that came to them, they told me later, which I'll share in a minute. But the other part that we're developing, and it's taken a while, this happened about 12 years ago, that we did these collections. There were actually 5 expeditions that the dots show there. The ones that are towards the southeastern part, those are the ones that the students were involved in. But what we're doing there is we're going to launch a website that our collaborators over there, plus anybody else in the world who's working there, they can click on one of those spots, drops down a species list. We're trying to get up as many photos, whether they were live in the field or dead fish. Some people like that. It can be helpful, but it's another sort of a collection. It's another reference. So that was the capacity building. Why is this important? Despite the long cultural development there, despite human habitation and alteration of the habitats there, we have one of the most diverse aquatic faunas on the planet there. And it's if somebody in here knows anything about freshwater fish, they'll say, "Oh, what about Brazil?" Yeah, Brazil is they've got more, but there are some really unique animals there, really unique fishes that live nowhere else, and they can tell us a lot about the evolution of the area. Plus, they're also very important for a lot of the villages. As you get inland, if you cross the mountain ranges there towards the coast, as you get inland, the freshwater fisheries are critical. They catch things that are this big, and they'll dry them, and they'll pound them up and make paste, fish paste, that they'll thicken their soups with, and it gives them protein. So it's very important. So that was the enticement. I said that there was another thing that came out as a benefit. My friend Samba Diallo in Conakry said he started laughing after our second trip. He said, I had the French worried that we were going to make a presence. So for the first time ever, when they would collaborate, they were asking, well, what do you guys want to do? So, okay, and so we've been talking about the length of the experience. Sometimes 4 weeks is plenty. I had these students, this group right here, we took them into the Parc National de Niger, Upper Niger National Park. And we were there for about 3 weeks. The rest of the time was spent getting in and out of there. But we were there for about 3 weeks. It'd be 106 degrees in the afternoon. If you never had a siesta in your life, go there. You will do nothing else. You'll find a tree and you'll go to sleep because you're completely worthless otherwise. And then you waste all your energy and you're no good later on when you can work. But it was a really different experience for them because they had never seen, these students had never seen such a different country. and had to encounter and deal with different cultural norms. They learned not to eat with their left hand. We ate with our hands when we were eating with people because everyone gathers around the same bowl. There's a real community of sharing there that we don't have here. They think we're very selfish here because we have plates and we don't share. So there's always room around the bowl for another person. So they got to learn that. But so they were adjusting not just to that, but the fact that the government, the official language was French, and that anyone we talked to could speak at least 3 languages because they would speak at least 2 of the other dominant languages. I don't remember how many they spoke in Guinea, but in Mali they spoke 32. One country. Okay, this was in Micronesia, and the same kind of things applied there in terms of what to look for in students. What did we do? I didn't take students who would never make it because they had to be able to endure field conditions. They could not whine. If they whined, you were miserable because you can't get away. And, you know, they had to have a passion. But I saw some really good things that came out of this through our STEP mentoring. And I said peer field veterans. That's because the lady in the green top down here in that jungle landscape, I actually invited her back on a second trip, Adriana Leva. She was so good on the first one, and I didn't have a graduate student coming. It's like, okay, Adriana, you can do it. She filled the place of a graduate student. And what was it? It was a link between me, the old professor, and someone who spoke and understood what they taught, or understood. And the guy over there in the white shirt in the boat, he was a postdoc. He was a postdoc with me in Africa too, and he was so good there. He was a parasitologist. So the only thing I had to worry about him was him messing up our fish specimens, digging out parasites. But he was excellent, because the guy next to him was in both of those pictures. I thought he was going to be a bust. You know, not every student works out. And I was an undergraduate. His name was Sean. Well, by the end of the project, Sean asked me if he could come into graduate school. And I took a gulp. It's like, how do I deal with this? Well, Sean, why? And then he started talking to me. He had been working with Ash, the fellow next to him, the whole time, learning the fish. I mean, there's a lot of fish. These were coral reef things as well as the freshwater stuff. And he learned the fish. He had learned not just that, but he had learned from talking to Ash that, you know, you need to do something. You're about ready to graduate. What are your plans? And so Ash could reach him in a way I never would have. I took him in, he got his master's thesis. It's published. It's on freshwater eels of the area. The thing up there has to do with the culture of one of the areas there. You never know what kind of cultural surprises you'll run into if you're not familiar with, you know, the nation. And we were in the Federated States of Micronesia, and this is Ponape. And on Ponape, one corner of the island, it has an interesting history, but in one corner of the island, there is one, it's not a village, it's just a group of people, an ethnic group, that they don't worship eels, but they respect them. So we couldn't collect freshwater eels in their area and kill them because it has something to do with an ancestral connection. Everywhere else on the island, they ate them as a delicacy, but they were safe in that corner. And then another thing that the students had to do was to be able to bounce back, be flexible, show some resiliency.
Frank, you got to be behind that microphone for us to hear you.
Show some resiliency. And sorry about that. So the young lady up there who's looking rather mopey, she had a good reason. We had just gone up to the top of a mountain and looking for a specific site to collect a specific kind of rare fish. And we were supposed to meet somebody, and they were not there. And we waited and waited and waited. Well, sometimes they're just not there. And they're not there because they don't want to be there, but they didn't want to tell you they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to say no. So anyway, she rolled with it. We all had a good time we went somewhere else. I don't think I had another slide. I think that was it. It's just basically one size doesn't fit all. So these are expeditions in the field. You take students out, you put them under very harsh conditions. They're going to be in very, very strange environments. So we've had occasions where I've had folks wanting to develop REUs, and this is to get back to any program officers at NSF, and they want 6 to 8 weeks. Well, we can do that, but not just doing that. It has to be a follow-up where they go do some processing or something, and I guess you could work something out. But anyway, it's a great learning experience. Students become, well, adults. So, thank you.